Okay, and welcome to the Economic Report. It's Brian here, and I'm glad to have you here. Today, we're talking about a subject we spoke about last week, and that is the BRICS nations are getting a bad taste of some bad medicine. As we know that both Russia and China were trying to do some things here with the U.S. dollar, most likely to try to destabilize the dollar, try to undercut the dollar as the world's reserve currency. And of course, what we saw here is a lot of coordination between the two countries. And of course, the idea that they and the rest of the BRICS, which is Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, have been working behind the scenes to kind of undercut the US dollar. But they were in for a surprise, and the surprise is that the U.S. stablecoin, yes, it's a U.S. dollar stablecoin, has really kind of unleashed a very, very powerful wave that these countries just weren't looking for. So we're going to dive into that a little bit today, and of course, maybe more importantly, how these things are here. They're going to affect your wallet, and if I could say one number, why it's number 3. And if I could also include why you should stick around here for the very end of this episode, uh, it's going to affect your wallet in some very, very unique and interesting ways. So make sure you are stay tuned to this important recording. And of course, the reason why we need to pay close attention to this story is going to hit every single one of us. I want to remind you, last week's recording, we spoke about the 3% rule, and that is what the United States is accepting as the new inflation number. The fact is that the Fed used to try to keep inflation under 2% or less, with the dual mandate of both low inflation and a workforce that is at near full employment. Well, I think we can throw some of that stuff out the door after the last Fed meeting. And what we're seeing instead is we're seeing that the Fed is now saying they're more worried about unemployment, less worried about 3% inflation. So that's something, once again, I want to make sure all our viewers have on their radar screen too, because it really is an important matter to pay attention to. But let's get back to the story at hand, which is China and Russia getting really worked up about, well, a situation they're kind of created for themselves. Let's check out what Trump, Bessent, and Howard Lutnick have put together. They shows Trump signing the Genius Act before, but it goes into some more detail here. I love this headline. Maybe you do too, because it says why China is spooked by dollar stable coins and how it will respond. And of course, this article has some really important things here. Is why I'm sharing that with you, dear folks. And it says that the U.S.-backed stablecoin gains traction. They threaten to bypass China's financial controls, and the Chinese government is poised to counter with its own tightly regulated digital money. And I say to that, good luck, China. You're biting off a little bit more than you can chew. And as, of course, the story goes, controlling access to money is no longer the exclusive privilege of the sovereign. Instead, access to money is increasingly governed through code, online networks, and protocol. The U.S. Genius Act, short for the Guiding and Establishing National Innovation and U.S. Stablecoins, has formalized its transformation by creating a framework of regulated U.S. banks to issue dollar-backed stablecoins. Yes, folks, that is a cryptocurrency, and it's going to have the same value as U.S. dollars, and there's a bond rating here, etc. But let me go into a little bit more detail here, because I think this is where China is getting worked up. Stable coins have a unique role in the cryptocurrency ecosystem. Unlike most cryptocurrencies, which can swing widely in price, stable coins are designed to maintain, yes, a stable value by being pegged to non-digital assets, such as fiat currencies like the US dollar or euro, making them a less volatile medium of exchange. And I'd run into some stuff here before dealing with bonds, dealing with the U.S. gold reserves, and even found some information here that was worthy of sharing about the Bitcoin that the US government has seized. So all of these things can be part of the equation here when you're trying to really figuring out how is the US government going to back the stablecoin. And it's really worth following because I really do believe that this is the way the United States is going to move forward with these transactions. And of course, if you're looking at the BRICS big plan to undermine the US dollar, what they've just had is this whole situation just blow up in their face. And I got to tell you, not that I don't think the US government needs to get their spending under control. I think for sure that is one issue to take into consideration. But the fact is that the US government is $37 trillion in debt. Boy, I almost said billion, $1 trillion in debt. And now this stable coin is going to allow the US government to almost double down on that amount of money, which is kind of crazy. Let's check out this next story because I think you're going to find quite a bit of value from it.
Genius Act forces all US stable coins to be fully backed 1:1 with treasuries or cash, with public audits and strict compliance, that every dollar of stable coins minted equals $1 of US government debt being purchased. You heard that right. Stablecoin issuers like Circle get to keep the yield on those treasuries, currently around 4%, as their business model suggests. Now, the government doesn't print more money. Pay attention. The government doesn't print more money or raise taxes. Instead, private firms fund US debt in exchange for risk free profits. It's like outsourcing the global distribution of US debt to crypto companies who wrap it in digital dollars and export it worldwide. The bottom line is that United States is backing these stablecoins with dollars. Like dollar earlier was backed by gold, which was delinked in 1971. Now this is how it gets interesting. The US has a $35 trillion debt pile. Servicing that debt gets easier if there are more buyers of these treasuries. By making stablecoins legally tied to treasuries, the US very smartly just guaranteed a new class of demand. So at 100 billion or $1 trillion in stable coins, well, that's 100 billion or $1 trillion of treasuries bought or absorbed. Now, the coin wrapped in dollar can be exported worldwide, which eventually means, ladies and gentlemen, exporting US debt to other countries. Meanwhile, stablecoin issuers earn billions in yield, and the US extends dollar dominance by making digital dollars the backbone of global payments. Now, for countries like Russia and China and other US rivals, this very pertinent alternative. How? You see, if treasuries yield 4%, but inflation runs at 5%, the US is effectively paying back interest on paper. But the true cost to the lender shrinks every year. Stablecoin issuers and foreign buyers eat the inflation losses while Washington quietly wins. You need to understand, ladies and gentlemen, US has always been at the receiving end of criticism that it continues.
I'm going to go ahead and start there because I think the viewers get the picture. And if you've been joining me for a while on the economic report, I think you're seeing the bigger picture. And Trump has surrounded himself with some super, super smart people. This Scott Bessent, Secretary of Treasury, The guy's no joke. He had worked with George Soros at one point in time to short the British pound. So he understands everything about treasury, understands everything about reserve currencies, and understands why it's so critically important to have a strong, super strong US dollar with really no rivals. And by the same token, Howard Lutnick, he's a likable fellow, first of all. He really is the Secretary of Commerce, and he also understands how important these currencies are going to figure into US trade dominance in the world. And of course, I would be remiss if I didn't mention David Sachs, who was part of Trump's inner circle as well. And of course, he's very big into the crypto world as well. And so you could think about these people that are surrounding Trump and how they're going to take this debt and do something with it. And while the BRIC nations, which is Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, had maybe more of a sinister plan about how they were going to, quote, take down the US dollar, I think you're seeing something that's not going to allow that to happen. Now, of course, I said here at the very end, I did make a promise here. And what I wanted to make sure that every viewer here understood was that 3% number we spoke about. The bottom line is we have to beat inflation. The people out here on Main Street are investments and whatever else we're doing to stay ahead of inflation. It's no longer 2% we're trying to beat. We are at least trying to beat 3%. And of course, we saw in the scenario listed on mint.com that they had a scenario where these treasuries were earning 4% for the holder. And so all of a sudden you see this as a possibility to outwork the 3% inflation costs. And of course, the vast majority of us won't be happy with 1% beating inflation, that we would really need something that does a lot better. And of course, that takes us back to the stock market. So I'm just sharing this with you today because I thought it was valuable enough that the people who follow the economic report really would benefit from seeing this. My name is Brian, and thank you for joining me at the economic report. Drop a comment below because I'd love to hear from you, and make sure you are liked and subscribed because your thoughts really do matter. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, I want to remind you that the biggest battle we fight is the one between our ears over our thoughts, our actions, and our attitude. Make somebody's day. Say hey to them today. And with that, I will catch you later. Thank you for joining me.